Hi, the beginning of our class for 1:17:13. And what I want you to do, those of you who are at home, is get out the paper that looks like this with the columns, and I'll get used to this. And all my people here are making unspiritual observations about this paper. So that's what I want you to do. Here's an unspiritual observation. It's about the Book of Lamentations. How do I know that? Well, right on the title, it says Lamentations. That's a good unspiritual observation. Another unspiritual observation, which was what we want, is that we have columns here. So now that you know what an unspiritual observation is, I want you to make more on your own. It'll be harder if you're doing it on your own, but that's okay. Whoa, look what you did. Oh, let me tell you why you want to have colored pencils. Look what she did. She observed. This is what you want with colored pencils. Look at how she made her observation. In the front of the class. Observe. She started doing each thing at the same color. I like this. See? And you want to do it so your teacher gives you the apple.
That's why she's up at the front.
So let me show my people. Look, this is why you want to have color. I don't know if you can see this. I hope you can, but she's earmarked everything with colored pencils. So if you have them, do that. And okay, now yes, she just did it. She's fixed.
No, I was like, oh, she called on that thing.
You're not going to see me all the time, but you will hear me. So I'm going to be moving around. I'm not stopping moving around just because you're there. You'll have to listen and pay attention to all these nice pupils here we have. Okay.
Can they see your face?
Yes, they can. I can too. So that I know where I can position myself. But it's not going to stop me from moving around, guys. We are broadcasting. Okay. What we're going to do now is pray and then I want to hear your observations because hopefully some of you, it clicked a little. And it's okay if it didn't because that's why we're here, to work together and for me to teach you. Okay, so let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you for this group of people, both here and online. We ask that you bless them. Bless them with wisdom, with knowledge of you, with understanding. Bless them with your loving kindness. And I ask that we really understand your word today. In Christ's precious name, amen. Amen. Okay, even though this is here, I'm not paying attention to it. So I'll be paying attention to you. I'll be walking around. And we even have somebody else coming. And what you were to do was make observations. Didn't have to be spiritual, did it? Let me hear some of your observations, and I believe they can hear you. So, but pick up your voice when you do. Just what's an observation, Marcia?
Well, you have at the top there Hebrew alphabet 22 letters, and I know those are 22 just verses.
Good for you. Yes. It says there are the Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters, and you observed that there are 22 verses in all, but Chapter 3 has 3 times that. Great, Ami. So glad to see you, and Delilah. I'm so happy that you got here. We are broadcasting, not live. But this will go on your email. You will be able to redo it just in case you want to hear it again, or send it to a friend, or if you're not able to make it because you're in dire straits. Do you understand that? Dire straits. Because I want you here, not home listening to the video. Then you can listen then and not miss anything. So my husband was gracious enough to get me a good Apple that's easy to work with, because the last time I did this, it took hours to do the right thing and messed me up all the time. And I get messed up easily. So we just prayed, and we're making observations on this paper that each one of you got at your seat. And if you didn't, I think, Ami, I didn't replace one for you. I know you have it there, but I want you to have this one. There you go. Okay. So we have one observation, and that observation is that it says at the top that the Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters, and that we have in each chapter of Lamentations 22 verses, except for chapter 3, which has
66.
which is
3
3
times.
times. See, you got it. Isn't it amazing how much you can learn just in a few seconds? And it's really important to understand all these things. Sometimes we have a tendency to enjoy reading the Bible devotionally. You know, what does this verse mean to me? What does that verse mean to me? And really, we need to study God's Word. We need to study it so hard that everything, every word is meaningful. So that's what we do in this class. We study it, and then we bring it down to our lives. Another observation.
Chapter 3 is broken up into a series of 3 letters.
Yes, did you see that? Chapter 3 is broken up into a series of 3. Now, what does that have to do with? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Me?
Anybody? Anybody?
It looks like
Well,
it's the
it's,
center and the important thing, and they devote more time to it. Because it's in
Repetition.
the middle of the book.
Oh, excellent point. I was thinking you were saying something else, but yes, this is the center of the book. Okay, Lamentations. Anything that's made up of 5, the Hebrew people love. A Torah is made up of 5. In the center of Torah, or the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of Moses, is Leviticus. In the center of Leviticus is the Holiness Code. In the center of the Holiness Code is the statement, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So in the center of law, the first 5 books, which is the law of Moses, the Torah, is love your neighbor as you love yourself. Just like Jesus said. So the center is an important place. So now we have Lamentations having 5 chapters, and therefore we know, this is important because the center, rather than the end, is the most important part. If there is a center, the author is going to direct you toward that center, rather than the end. So we have the center seems to be longer, and therefore we know the author is directing our attention to that place. Okay, give me some more observations.
I didn't know if your Hebrew things were words or letters.
Oh, okay. She made an observation that the Hebrew here, she had to guess that was Hebrew, but she made a good guess because what does it tell us at the top? Hebrew. Okay, so we kind of guess that, therefore, that if it's Hebrew, and there's one little thing here, it must be a letter. What do you think those letters, those Hebrew letters, represent?
Probably a repetition of the same words.
There's not that, although that's what it's almost, you're almost there. What is it? What does that Hebrew letter represent? Or at least those, did you look down? There's one here in verse 1, there's a Hebrew letter. Verse 2, in column 1, there's a Hebrew letter. And verse 3, there's another Hebrew letter. Not much different from that. And those of you who are at home, I couldn't get the Hebrew across, so listen carefully. This takes only a minor part of the lesson. So what does that Hebrew letter represent? The first one. What do you think it represents? It tells you right there. A! Good for you! See, you got an observation. It's next to an A.
That was a trick.
No, you know that I'm into real easy answers. So, what does the second letter down represent? A B. See, you're getting it. An angel said it first, so here she goes. And that third letter down is is a C, right? So now you can look across to chapter 3 and look down, and you have a series of A's, and then a series of B's, and a series of C's. And what that represents is this: the author starts each verse with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And so in our language, verse 1 starts with an A. In Hebrew, it would be Aleph. You can forget that immediately. A. The second verse starts with a
B.
The third verse starts with a
C.
and on down until you get through how many verses? 22 for the 1 and 2 and 4 and 5. How many letters then does it go through? All the Hebrew letters. So what he's doing is he's giving you an acrostic, an alphabetical acrostic. Verse 1 starts with A, verse 2 starts with B, verse 3 starts with C, or their ABC, Aleph, Bet, Gamma. So that's theirs. Now look at the center one, and we see that the A is repeated for how many verses? 3. And then the next 3 verses are A,
B.
and the next 3 verses start with a
C.
Right. So the only difference I would say with your thing is not every word starts with an Aleph, Jeannie. Just the first word starts. Now, are you going to see this in your Bible?
No.
No, why not?
English.
It's not Hebrew. Now, our Bible will probably start even with a whole different word than the Hebrew Bible, because we line up our words differently. A lot of times the Hebrews will start with and plus a verb. We never start a sentence with and plus a verb. And they do. And that would be fine for this because and, you know. Okay, so we have this. Now, what one is the oddest one in the bunch besides chapter 3? Chapter 3, which has chapter 5. What are you noting there? The letters are different. In fact, the whole, even though there are 22 verses to go along with the 22 letters to the alphabet, they're all messed up. Completely a mess. In fact, some letters aren't even here. Some letters are repeated at the beginning of the verse. So it's going to mirror something. Now, what if I were to tell you that the Book of Lamentations I would call is the Book of Grief? Why would I call the Book of Lamentations the Book of Grief? Yes, sad and grieving. Right, it's the book. And so what does Lamentations boil down to? A lament. Yes, it's a lament. And the whole book is a lament. And so if the whole book is a lament, then he's trying to get everything out that's in his heart, isn't he? From A to Z. He's everything that's in his heart. All the grief that he can muster up is there, and he's pouring it out from A to Z. That's what he's telling you. I can grieve from A to Z before my God. He can take it. And if you read the Book of Lamentations, he better be able to take it. Because this guy, Jeremiah, is pouring it out. And at times, when he pours it out, he's pouring it out with anger, with resentment, with words that you wouldn't say to anyone. But he's saying it to God. From A to Z is his grief. Do you get that? What's he grieving about? Does anybody know about Lamentations, what he's grieving about? The destruction of Jerusalem at the Babylonian captivity. Okay, now let me give you our map jig. Here we have, an angel needs to hear this, and so does D. What's this?
Israel.
Good. Somebody said it. You all know it. I know you know it. Israel, right. And this is the Fertile Crescent. And so over here, this is Israel, and over the Fertile Crescent, we're going to pass by Syria, which is right above Israel, pass by Haran, which is where Abraham's family stayed, and Jacob came back and got his wife, Rachel. Here is Assyria. Now, this was the first captivity. Assyria comes over the Fertile Crescent because she is even more dominant than Babylon at this time. Babylon is just a measly little country, but Assyria has control of Babylon. She goes over the Fertile Crescent and goes to the what part of Israel? Do you know this part? The northern kingdom. Takes the northern kingdom over here into captivity. For 150 to 200 years after that, the prophets plead with the people, don't follow after your sister, Israel. Don't follow after the northern kingdom. They were into idolatry. They were into infant sacrifices. They were into inordinate sexual practices. Don't do it. Because if you do it, God's going to come and take you into captivity too. And that's what happens. During the time of Jeremiah and other prophets, Babylon, remember, she's down here. She comes up and passes through and takes over what country? Assyria, passes through Haran, passes through Syria, comes down to the Southern Kingdom. Takes them into captivity. It's at this time that we have Lamentations written, because it's such a despicable, deplorable, heinous time. It's so ugly that mothers and fathers eat their children. It's so bad that they're put in chains naked, because the word for exile is also the same letters as naked. And so we have them going into exile naked. And those Babylonian troops are not going to go slow. They want to get back home with their people. So what's going to happen to these people in their chains if they can't keep up?
They'll be left behind.
Left to die. It's ugly. It's horrible. And we're going to be reading about it today so that you can see why our author, Jeremiah probably, our author is in such grief, lamenting. From A to Z. See why he's using A to Z? In order to show you, you can grieve from A to Z. But there's something else about an A and a Z. They're boundaries. There are boundaries to the alphabet, isn't there? There's an A and nothing before it. There's a Z and nothing after it. There are boundaries, aren't there?
Bookends.
Kind of like bookends. Mm-hmm. Boundaries. And that tells you another thing about grief. That there needs to be boundaries to our grief. Mm-hmm. There needs to be boundaries to our grief. Okay. A to Z, crying out, and even being angry at God, but there needs to be boundaries. Now, check out what I mean. If there aren't boundaries, there's a lot of things that can happen, but let me name 3. Despair. If you don't have boundaries to your grief, there's a difference between grief and despair. Despair means you give up. There's nothing, no hope. There's nothing left except grieving and despair. And it goes on and on and on and on. There's got to be boundaries. You can go into despair. You can commit suicide because your grief is so bad and it never ends. And you can be mentally off, unhinged. I remember watching a woman, this was years ago, walking with a shopping cart. She would walk all over Clementine, Pine Hill, and Ariel. Just walk with this shopping cart. And she must have been in her 40s, so she wasn't really old, but she was out of it. And I used to wonder, what in the world happened to her? What horrible incident happened to her where she just went out of her mind? And that's why the mental hospitals, because people just can't, they go beyond grief into despair, beyond despair into mental illness or even suicide. So there has to be, and that's the A to Z tells us that. So what are the boundaries? Because our lamenter is going to give us those boundaries, but what do you think is the boundary for grief? What holds us back from going into despair?
Hope.
Okay.
Faith.
Acceptance, faith, that all those things, but that really comes from something else because we have to do something. What is it that we can do that will hold it in so that we have hope and faith and acceptance?
Right. Prayer.
Bingo. And so either on the other side of this paper or the paper that came with you, you're going to see that lamentation is really strewn with prayers. Yeah, either one of the papers has lamentations and prayer. See it? Okay. I call Lamentations the book of grief, but not despair. Because this man knew that he could contain all that grief, which was from A to Z, which was almost intolerable, which was a real crying out to God over everything, really telling God what was going on. But he could hold it in because of the prayer.
Isn't that where great is thy faithfulness?
Yes, that's where it is. You're right. So let's look at these prayers because we see here there are 6 prayers in Lamentations. Now, what I'm going to do is read, and I want you to listen to it because I want you to hear a word that describes what the lamenter or griever wants God to do. And he says this. See, Yahweh, my affliction, for the enemy has magnified himself. Second prayer. See, Yahweh, and look, for I am despised. Third prayer. See, Yahweh, for I am in distress. My spirit is greatly troubled. My heart is overturned within me, for I have been very rebellious. For my groans are many, and my heart is faint. See, Yahweh, and look. With whom have you dealt thus? Should women eat their offspring and little ones who were born healthy? Do you see his grief expressed in the prayer? Why do people pray?
They need help.
They need help. What else?
For strength.
For strength. Communication.
Praise.
For praise. Okay, all these things, but because they believe what? What do they believe?
Someone's listening.
Someone's listening. Someone's listening. That keeps us from despair. But someone is also what he wants of Yahweh here. And what is it that keeps being repeated? Yahweh, I want you to what? See. Now, the other one is here, so let's look at that one. I called on your name. This is in 3:55-56. I called on your name, Yahweh, out of the lowest pit. I mean, he is down there. You have heard my voice. Do not hide your ear from my prayer for relief, for my cry for help. He wants God to do 2 things. See and hear. Because if God sees and hears, what? What does he know?
He'll help.
He'll help. And God will know. 2 things. God's going to help me. So there's their faith. And God's going to know. God knows. I know that God knows what I'm going through. Doesn't that make a difference? He sees me. He hears me. Let's take a look at Genesis 16:9-11 real quick. Because the psalmist, the lamenter, is definitely. Put this over here. I want you to go to Genesis 16. This is the story of Hagar. Remember her? She was given to Abraham to be a surrogate mother. She's going to bear a son for Abraham to give to Sarai. And but Sarai realizes that Hagar is looking at her differently now. I'm better than you type of look. And so Sarai treats her so harshly that Hagar feels she needs to run away. She is desperate. She doesn't know what to do. You have to be really desperate to run away from a good thing. She has a good job here. Okay, she from verse 9 to 11, we're going to read. Then the angel of the Lord said to Hagar, who's in despair in the wilderness, doesn't have anything to drink, return to your mistress and submit yourself to her authority. Moreover, the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants so that they will be too many to count. Then I want you to go down to verse 12. Wait a second. No, stay there. Behold, you are with child. You will bear a son. You will call his name Ishmael. Does anybody remember what that means? Ishmael?
God here.
Yes.
Well, I saw it in the margin.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Marjorie, you can see it in the margin. That's a good observation. God, what? Hears. Every time she says his name, what's she going to be reminded of? God hears. When she goes back to her affliction, because that's what the angel tells her to do, go back to your affliction. That's what it says in the Hebrew. She's going to be able to remember that God heard her every time she says her son's name. But also, she has another thing that she learns in verse 13. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. This is what she calls him. You are a God who sees. Sees. For she said, have I even remained alive here after seeing him? Therefore the well was called Beer Lahairoi, or well of the living one who sees me. He sees. He hears. And that's exactly probably what the lamenter is remembering. You saw, you heard Hagar. She was a nobody, a servant, a slave, an Egyptian, not even a Hebrew. But you saw her, you heard her. That's what I want from you. I want you to see my affliction, hear my cry, because then I know you'll help me. Then I'll know that you are there for me.
The Hebrews in Egypt, when they were in bondage, God saw their affliction. He heard their cry.
Right. In Exodus, it says the same thing about the Hebrew people. God said, I've seen you and I've heard you. Now I'm going to do something about it. Excellent point. And so we have the last prayer, which is the last several verses of the whole book. He ends the book with a prayer. Now watch, because we said the letters in the last chapter of the book were all disorganized. And what did I say they were disorganized for? What did it mirror? It has it right there.
Grief.
Yes. It reflected really the disorganization, the disruption, the lack of continuity of grief. I don't know if you've ever grieved. I'm sure you have. Is there any organization to your grief? Not up there. You're all over the place, aren't you? Even if it's from A to Z, you're all over the place. One moment you're hopeful, the next moment you're in grief and utter sorrow again, and then you're hopeful, and then you're in another sorrow. It's disorganized, and I think that's what the alphabet being disorganized in that last chapter represents: the disorganization, the disruption, the disjunction of grief. And so we even have it in this last prayer. Look at it. He goes from hope to grief again. You, Yahweh, rule forever. Your throne is from generation to generation. You know what the world thinks of as large and personal force or nature is really what he says, God's authority and sovereignty in your life. God is sovereign. It may look disjunctive. It may look disorganized. It may look like You know, you're not, see, everything is topsy-turvy. But God is sovereign. And he says that. But look where he goes. Why do you forget us forever? Why do you forsake us so long? What's that? He's back into
Despair.
Yeah, grief. And the next one, restore us to you, Yahweh. He's back into hope that we may be restored. Renew our days of old. He's back into hope again. But then he goes down, and the last line it goes down. Unless you have utterly rejected us and are exceedingly angry with us. You see that? This is real grief, isn't it? I'm so glad this book is in our Bible. It tells us that we can grieve like this. It tells us that there is a boundary to that grief. We can hope in God. God is sovereign. We don't have to go into despair, do we? Because each of us could do that. Good for you. You did great. So now what I want you to do, and you're probably saying to yourself, she promised we'd be in the book of Ruth. I promise. If we can get through just this next part, we will be. I promise. We will go into Ruth. But I do want to get you to see. The next page is 2 columns. 2 columns. It's 2 Kings 25 on one column and Lamentations in the captivity in the other. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this to you as a homework assignment because I really do want to get to Ruth. But what I want to do is ask you to do is read that first column for homework because we'll probably touch on this next week. It's the blow-by-blow, cold record of the Babylonian captivity from the point of view of 2 Kings 25. I mean, it's blow by blow. There is nothing, there's no warmth in it. It's like reading you know why kids hate history? Because it's cold, indifferent, giving up facts, isn't it? You want it personal. So when I was homeschooling my kids, we never even opened a history book, yet they love history. And so what we would do was get it on the personal side. We would take trips to historical place. We would camping trips down to Virginia, up to Massachusetts, and we'd go to the places. And then I would read historical novels on children's level just to get them to feel the history. My kids always loved history. They got good grades in history. They really, because I took them away from that history textbook. And the record is important to know. It is important to know. And that's on your left-hand side. But on the right side, it's the same incident, same exact incident, being recorded, but in poetry. Yeah. With the compassion and the passion that goes along with poetry. For instance, in verse 4, it says this, the roads of Zion are in mourning. Do roads go in mourning? No, what's he talking about in poetic form?
The people were mourning.
Yeah, as they're on the road, and where are they going?
Captivity.
Into captivity. They're mourning, but he puts it in poetic form to almost look like even the roads themselves. Yeah, it is the passion here. Look at verse 11. All her people groan, seeking bread. They have given their precious things for food. They groan. How about, go down to verse 20. See, O Lord, for I am in distress. My spirit is greatly troubled. My heart is overturned within me. Do you see his grief? He calls in his spirit, his heart, his very being. I am in distress. Or the last one, 2:11. My eyes fail because of tears. My spirit is greatly troubled. My heart is poured out on the earth. Wow, is that a different than the cold blow-by-blow account of the greatest devastation that Israel ever had. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to read both columns. See the difference. Feel the difference. Really look at it. And then what I'd like you to do is draw lines between the two. Because I particularly, purposefully pulled out verses that really showed this side, the historical account. So on this side is, on the historical account, it's verse after verse after verse. But in this one, it's verses pulled out of Lamentations that mirror what happened in the first column, the historical event. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Ruth! We're in Ruth. Yes, go ahead.
When did you send the columns?
It didn't come with your thing?
The same time.
Okay, got another one right here.
A few days ago.
Got it. There you go.
I've been away, but I looked back on my computer and I couldn't find anything.
Oh, you didn't get anything? So here's the whole thing. Here's what you'll need today.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. We're going to have the same type of thing in the book of Ruth, the first chapter of Ruth. I want you to see the first chapter of Ruth in a different way today than you normally do. Because what you normally do you see the play, Ruth, and it's in play? I want you to keep in mind what you've learned about grief as we read through this play. Because that first chapter is a chapter of grief. You're going to get the blow-by-blow account of what happened to her. You're also going to get Naomi's lamentation. She's going to have a lamentation in here.
No, I don't have the play.
The play? It's right here.
That's it.
That's it, Ruth. And see, narrator.
All right, it looks like it's different. Why do they have something printed on top?
I don't know.
Oh.
It's probably from the next previous page. It's a carryover from the
page.
previous page.
All right, I got it.
We're so used to reading Ruth
Actually, I saw that.
with the end in view, the good ending in view. Oh, it's really hard to identify with other people's grief. So what we do is we read through it, knowing the end, the good ending. Ruth gets a kinsman redeemer. Naomi gets a kinsman redeemer. Everything ends happily ever after. And that's what we think of because we don't want to identify with Naomi's grief because it's too horrendous. It hurts too much. And we all protect ourselves from grief. Well, I don't want you to protect yourself as we're reading this. I want you to feel her pain. I want you to go through this and identify with Naomi and her grief. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to find the lines that are the historical record of what happened to Naomi's family. So underline the historical record just like you would have underlined 2 Kings 25. There's a few verses, a few lines that will be the historical record as we read through. I also want you to find her lamentation as we read through this. She does give a lament. It's poetic. It shows her grief. The first is going to be a historical record, an account of what happened to her. Very cold, very almost choppy, point blank. But the lament is going to show it from her point of view. So those two things I want you to watch for as you read through, as we read through this. And so I'm going to ask, Bob, can you please be our narrator? Mm-hmm. Okay? And then Phyllis, will you be our Naomi? And we're going to have Ruth and Orpah, Angel, you don't mind being okay?
Who am I, Ruth and Orpah?
Yeah, you're Ruth and Ruth and Orpah. Let's see. Oh, women of Bethlehem. Kathleen, would you? Catherine.
Yep.
What is it? Catherine or Kathleen?
Kathleen.
Kathleen. And she's been coming to my Bible study for at least almost a decade now.
Almost a day, yeah.
Kathleen. Yeah, that's how good I'm going to be with your names as you come in. I'm not good at
She'll
church
get it
too.
eventually.
Okay, we have the parts. Let's read through the play. You're going to do two things. What are they?
For the historical record and
Lamentation, and you're going to do one other thing.
Identify with
Identify with Naomi. Okay, let's read it out loud. Take your parts.
In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi. And the names of the 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion.
Mm-hmm.
There were Epaphrodites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The names of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the women were left without their 2 sons and her husband. Then she rose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them bread. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah.
Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband.
Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept.
Now we will return with you to your people.
Return, my daughters, why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Return, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter for your sake, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me.
Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her.
See, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law.
Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you.
And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the 2 of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them.
Is this Naomi?
Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has returned me empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?
So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest.
Okay. Did you notice anything different as you read it from Naomi's perspective? Without the good ending in view. Because she lived it without the good ending in view, didn't she? There she is, in the midst of all this awful thing that has happened to her, and she has no idea what the ending is. So, did you understand her point of view? A little better, seeing it that way, without a good ending in view. Where did you see the blow-by-blow account of exactly what happened to her? Did you see that? Was there? Where did you see that?
Narrator 1
2, and then at the end.
Right, you saw all those. Right, he gave a narration of what happened. Right, I would zero in on at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4.5 lines from the bottom, from on the road to Bethlehem. He says these words, but and he gives a blow-by-blow account of what happens to her in these words. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died. She was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Hard to get wring any grieving or compassion out of that, isn't it? So where in the world is the lamentation? Because God gives us the ability, the right to lament, because he gives a book in the Bible called Lamentation, so he gives us the right to lament. Where is that found in this book? Did you see her lament?
Where is her lament?
Yes, her lament.
Okay. Have I yet sons in my womb?
Okay,
I am too old to have a husband.
that's good.
Call
It
me
is,
Mama.
for it is exceedingly bitter for me.
Yeah.
To me, for
Do
your
not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has returned me empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? Do you see the lament? It's pretty. Sometimes we'd be afraid to say things like that, wouldn't we? We'd almost feel as though it was an act of unfaithfulness. And let me get across one big point. Grief is not a lack of faith. Grief is not a lack of faith. Okay, get that? So that you can grieve. You need to grieve. If you need to grieve, whether it be the loss of your home, your child gone astray, whether it be that your husband has lost his job or your wife has gone astray, that has happened. You need to grieve from A to Z, Aleph to Tav. Do grieve, and Naomi feels that she can do that, and before other people, doesn't she? She grieves. And give people a chance to grieve. Just give them a chance to grieve. Go ahead.
But she lost everything. It's hard for us to comprehend it. It's worse than Job.
Yeah.
He still had his wife and property.
Yeah.
She has nothing.
Yeah. And he could still go on. She has nothing. You are right. You are right.
But Job didn't. She didn't have boils.
Remember, for her, there's no Social Security, no government pension, no food stamps, nothing. She has lost everything. You are right. So we see her lamenting, but we also see something else, and that's what I want you to take the next paper. It has those 2s that I just pointed out, the historical record. On the left side, do you see the 2 columns? It says Ruth and Lament. Do you see that?
Yeah.
We're going to really look at these 2 and compare these 2. See that? You get to see all my notes too. My paper is always full of notes. This is how I remember things. Okay, what you're going to do is read back and forth again. Yeah, take Kathleen likes to read by herself, but I'm not giving anybody else. She's been with me longest, and she's the teacher's pet, and so
It's distracting.
She marks on paper with colored pens.
Marjorie and Pam would do together. You 3 work together. You two, and you 2. Just read back and forth, one out loud to each other, but not so loud that you disrupt other people's reading. And one take one column, the other take the other column, and just compare. Tell me what they sound like to you.
And Elimelech, when Naomi's husband died, and she left with her, she was left with her 2 sons. They took for themselves Moabite women as wives. The name of the one was Oprah and the Ruth. They lived there about 10 years. Both Nahon and Chon died, and the women were Ruth, and her 2 children and her husband were without her 2 children.
Do not call me Naomi. It's just pleasant. Call me matter of well, see, we have a ecclesia or a chiasm where the Almighty Shaddai has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, but Yahweh has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi? Since Yahweh has witnessed against me, and the Almighty Shaddai has afflicted me.
Yes, they do.
What does one have that the other doesn't have?
Husband and children.
Lacks compassion.
It lacks compassion, doesn't it?
Poetry.
It's a historical event. We need to see it. We need to know what happened so that we can have compassion on her. But it in itself, the words chosen, the way it's written, it lacks compassion. But what do we see in the lament? How's it written, by the way? How is the lament written? Take a look at it.
It's chiasm.
It's a chiasm, which is kind of a poetry. Poetry can have a chiasm in it. It doesn't have to be. Okay, so here's what I mean by chiasm, because we have Angel here, who's new, and D. Okay, a chiasm, it has like brackets. Something is said here that is said at the end. And then you move inward, and something is said here that's said at the end. And sometimes we can go even more inward. Something here is said here. So a phrase or a word is said here that's said here, and another phrase or word is said here or here, and then it keeps going in. And very often it's pointing toward the center. So let's look at it in that way. This is chiastically arranged. Do you see the first day? Let's look and see what's the same between the first day and the last day. For the Almighty, or Shaddai, has dealt very bitterly with me. Look at the last line. And the Almighty, or Shaddai in Hebrew, has afflicted me. What's the same in both parts?
Almighty Shaddai.
Yes. The Lord's name makes the A and the A. We're really not sure exactly what Shaddai means. It's a rare word, so we can guess. Almighty is a good translation because it could mean, and my pastor always says it, the big-breasted one. You know, the one, you know, the guy who has the 6-pack, you know, that's what, you know, he's just big-breasted. He's just strong. That's what Shaddai probably could mean. It might be because it may be taken from the word that could describe mountains, and mountains could look like big breasts. And so he's the big-breasted one. Okay, so let's go into the B and the B. I went out full, but Yahweh has brought me back empty. And the second B, since Yahweh has witnessed against me. What holds those two together? We had Yahweh. So another name for him. She's using these names in order to bring about a poem, a chiastic poem. Shaddai, Yahweh. Where else did you hear? Anybody remember another book that has the word Shaddai? It's also a book of Lamentations. A book of Job. Job is full of poetry and laments on Job's part. And he uses Shaddai. He says El Shaddai, God Almighty. And again, she knows that she can use the word Shaddai because it's been used before by Job in a lament. So she uses it. She's doing a lament. What did you notice about the descriptive words? How does she describe Yahweh's actions? Look at it. Tell me some.
Bitter.
He has dealt very bitterly with me.
Afflicted.
Afflicted. Right. What's another description? He's brought me back empty. And what else? One more. He's even witnessed against me. He's a witness before the judge against me. And I've been condemned. That's what he's saying.
Do you think
sound
she
very
felt
angry.
that way?
Oh, I'm sure he is. And some of us who have, if we ever go into grief, I mean, there's a point where you can be, what? Angry and say it. That's hard to believe. And you're still faithful? Yeah.
Do you think she felt that way, and not the anger, but when she said he witnessed against her for going down to?
That could be. That
Because
could
they
be.
weren't
Very well
supposed to
be.
leave.
Yes. Yeah. Even Jeremiah in the Book of Lamentations shows that I have been rebellious in my heart. I've been rebellious toward you. I've been angry and rebellious toward you. God can take it. God can take it. Did you notice that? I want you to circle all the pronouns in this lamentation. Me and me again.
And me. And me. Every line.
Every line has something about me. What does that tell you about grief?
It's all about me.
It's all about it.
Self-absorbed.
Did you? Yeah, self-absorption. And that's okay. That's okay because we know it's what? Limited. Okay, and that's what we have to get. There are times when you get hurt. What do? I burned my thumb one time. What did I do? Protected it, didn't I? Put medicine on it, put a Band-Aid on it, and kept it in hiding. Don't anybody touch this thumb. I had kids. Stay away from my thumb. It hurts. But
I just want to say real quick and get back to the players that this is taking me back when I had my first stroke. And I'm sitting in the wheelchair and I'm looking at everybody outside, walking around, going to bed. And I'm angry. I'm saying, why do I have to be here in this wheelchair? Why? I don't want to read. I don't want to listen to gospel music. I don't want to read my Bible because I was angry at God, and I let him know that, But after a while, it was like he took the blinders off my eyes. Let me show you how it could have been. And then I'm looking around at other people who I was going to therapy with, and I'm seeing, people in far worse off situations than I was in. Even though I was in the chair, I felt half the height of everybody else, I said, when I saw how everybody, other people were, I said, okay, God, I hear you. And then I started doing with the therapist because I didn't want to do anything. I was angry.
Yeah.
I was real angry.
But there were boundaries to your anger, so you
Yes.
didn't go
Yeah.
into despair. You
Yeah.
stayed in grief and stayed out of despair and stayed out of giving up totally. Excellent. I know that we all have those stories, and I want you to think about those stories as we're going through here so that the next time you go through a grief situation, sometimes some of us are going to, some of us women, the death of a spouse. Or a child or a parent, and so we need to know this, that God lets us lament, grieve. Now, it's funny because just previous to this encounter with the townspeople where she laments, she's just had a conversation with her daughter-in-law. Go back to the paper that's the play. And let's see that conversation. Right before near the bottom, the last time you see, the next to the last time you see Naomi. So go up from the last time, which is second to the last, and you see Naomi. See,
Your sister-in-law has returned to her
people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. And what does Ruth reply?
To urge me to leave you or to return from following you.
Okay. Is she really empty?
No.
She's got the girls there.
She's got the
Yeah.
girls.
Yeah, and in the end, she even has just. So is she coming back empty?
No.
So what does Go ahead, Marjorie.
No, I just saying, I was looking at the next line where she said, "Is this Naomi, the townspeople?" She must have been so different.
Yeah, I'm sure. 10 years, she's older, but also the grief.
Yeah.
Yeah, grief. Grief can age you.
Mm-hmm.
Grief can age you. And so you have, so what does grief do in its total absorption that you've got to fight against, almost? What did it do to Naomi?
It keeps you from realizing what you do have.
What you do have. God has a plan for everything in your life. And so it keeps you from looking at it from God's perspective, doesn't it? So that's another reason why we have to have boundaries here on our grief. Because we have to look at it from God's perspective in order to get through it. And that there is a reason for everything. And Naomi didn't see any good. And it was right in front of her eyes. Because the townspeople later on are going to tell her, Ruth is better than having sons. That's how good she is. Had Ruth lost anything?
She lost her husband.
She lost her husband. What else do you know about her? She had no sons. I don't know if you ever grieved because you didn't have children. I did, and I know plenty of people that either never had children or they couldn't have children for years. And that grief is awful. And she had no children. So, do you see a lament for Ruth?
She also left her home.
And she's leaving her home and her family. What makes a difference between Ruth and Naomi? What makes the difference? Why is Ruth able to go on more quickly than Naomi?
Youth.
Okay, that's a good one. Youth helps. She is young. But I've seen young people go into despair.
Right.
Okay? So what makes the difference?
Well, Naomi looked at what she didn't have, but I think Ruth looked at what she did have.
And what did Ruth have?
She had Naomi.
She had
Naomi.
Yeah.
So what's she doing that Naomi is not doing that's helping her?
Exercising her faith.
She's exercising her faith.
Accepting the situation.
Yes, she is.
Looking at more positive stuff in your life.
Looking at more positive stuff in your life. But what particularly? What is she doing that's getting her past herself?
Loving other people.
Loving someone else. Caring about somebody else. Reaching out. If you're ever in a depression or despair or anxiety, whatever it is, grieving, whatever, one of the things that will get you over the hump, that got Ruth over the hump, is what?
Looking out for Naomi.
Yes. Someone else. Someone else.
I often think when we read the book of Ruth, I mean, you see Naomi lament, and as we said, focus on what she doesn't have and everything. But there must have been something really special about her.
That Ruth
would
left
choose
everything.
to
Left
go with
everything. She had seen Naomi for how long?
10 years.
10 years. She knows Naomi. She knows that this is, that's why I was glad that God had me wait 5 years to have a baby, because when I was pregnant, I could do nothing. And it's a good thing Eddie knew that this was only temporary, because he'd seen me 5 years doing what I needed to do. And so he was able to she was able to overlook it. She had seen what Naomi was really about. And because she had seen it, she had compassion for Naomi. Loving kindness toward Naomi.
But Naomi's God, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I mean.
That's
lived it
great.
out.
That is great. Because she had seen Naomi, we see a moment of faith in Ruth's life, don't we? Where she'd been with the other gods, and she didn't want them. She left them. Now she's centered on Yahweh.
I
Wow.
think that action alone was a biggie. It's not like, oh, she went to another town. She left
Her people.
and went with Ruth.
Yeah. And her gods.
And their gods and all that. I mean, having left a said religion that I was brought up in,
Yeah.
into Christianity. It's almost like saying you're not Irish anymore.
Yeah,
How do you just do that?
I know.
So that was big, and I think getting back to your question, 2 questions back, I think that helped Ruth be able to go on because she had already taken steps of change.
Yes, right. The heart was there. She verbalized it later, but the heart toward God, toward Naomi, was there. And that helps. So, we have grief from A to Z, Aleph to Tov. We can grieve, and we can grieve really harshly. We can really talk to God. Phyllis was honest with God. He can take it. But there are boundaries to this grief, and what are those boundaries? Prayer, prayer, prayer. Knowing God is sovereign. You are sovereign, God. I know it. So let me give you just a short story about a friend I have in my church. Her name is Marjorie. When Marjorie was much younger, she had a daughter, a 7-year-old daughter, who got killed in an automobile accident, just run over. She went down for the count. She didn't think she'd ever get up again, this mommy. It wasn't until she really took into her heart the sovereignty of God. God has a plan for everything. He is sovereign. He let it happen. There's a purpose. When she recognized that, she could take the steps back. And that's what we need to do. Believe that everything that happens to us is under the control of the sovereign hand of God. Can we pray? Father in heaven, thank you, thank you. You are a good God. You accept our grief. Lord, you even put limits on it for our health, for our good, because you tell us that we can pray about it and really go to you and plead that you might see us and hear us and understand us. We do trust your sovereignty, O God. We trust it with all our heart. And today we choose to have faith in you. A hard thing to do sometimes. Easy in great circumstances, hard to do in the hard circumstances. Keep us standing, Lord, in the evil day against the evil one with his fiery darts. In Christ's precious name, amen. Now, just one more. We will be unpeeling Ruth like an onion. So we're going to be in chapter 1 for several weeks. We're going to take the peels off. Okay? God bless you. And I can stop the